Welcome back to Barbecue and Bottles. I'm Jared, and on today's episode, we've got a world first for you. So this is a new steak preparation technique, and it came to us through one of the subscribers here on the channel. I've done a little bit of Googling, and I don't think anybody else in the world is actually doing this. So I do think it's a world premiere. And we're gonna give credit to Oliver, and we didn't want us to use his last name, so we'll just call him Oliver through this episode, but appreciate him reaching out
and introducing us to what he refers to as the middle sear method.
So if you're into that kind of thing, stick with us. So this isn't the reverse sear method either, where you first cook your steak indirect until you hit 125 internal temp and then sear it off. And it's not the original sear method either, the one that was invented by cavemen, where you just grill your meat straight over the fire and try to build up your crust. So for this experiment, we've got this beautiful USDA ribeye. Just look at the marbling throughout this. That's all gonna render down, make this a really nice, juicy, tender steak. So we're just gonna quickly season this with a little bit of salt. So we're just going in with freshly milled sea salt. You can use kosher salt, you can use Maldon salt, finishing salt, but just make sure you get a generous amount of salt, because a cut this thick is gonna be very difficult to over season, and you want that salt to penetrate through the meat. Flip it over, we'll do the same on the other side. Just look at that. Now we're ready to go. So for step one, you're gonna wanna preheat your smoker to 320 degrees Fahrenheit. Now you can roast your steak in the oven if you don't have a smoker, but you'll miss out on that glorious smoky flavor. So for this cook, we used the Bradley vertical smoker, and we're actually using alder wood. So we just slot it down this tube here, and the machine will feed these wood briquettes into a little smoker in the inside, and that will actually generate the smoke flavor. I'm really excited to see how this alder turns out. Now you put your steak in once you've preheated the smoker to 320, and you'll keep it in there until it hits an internal temp of 70 Fahrenheit, and it's half baked. And all of these steps will be written out in the description below, just in case you missed anything.
Once your steak hits an internal temp of 70 degrees Fahrenheit, you're gonna wanna remove that from the smoker and just let it rest for a few minutes.
Now the second step, or the middle step, is to sear it, hence the name, the middle sear. So get your cast iron ripping hot. You'll want a surface temperature of between 450 to 500 degrees Fahrenheit. You get your steak down in there and sear it off on each side for a minute or two until you get that maillard reaction, forming a beautiful crust. Get a couple tablespoons of butter in there, some crushed garlic cloves, and some rosemary that you've ruffled up. And now start basting that steak as well as it's searing off and forming its crust. Now once you've actually built up your desired crust, it's time to move on to step 3. So just let your steak rest for a minute or two on a cooling rack. Set your smoker temperature to 170 Fahrenheit. Now load your steak back in. And then finish it off in a really low and slow cook until you hit your final level of doneness. We're aiming for 130 here for a nice medium rare. So we've got this steak inside. It smells incredible, looks absolutely gorgeous. Just look at this guy. Absolutely incredible here. Got a really nice crust formed on the outside. And again, the benefit relative to a traditional reverse sear this method is you're gonna hit your target temp. Because you finish this off really low and slow, there's no carryover cooking. And you know, when you're doing a typical reverse sear, you might be trying to sear this off at the end to give it its crust, and you might actually blow past your target temp while you're just trying to really develop that crust. Here you don't have to worry about that. The crust's already formed. By the time you're actually hitting your target temp, you just take it off and there's no carryover cooking. And to prove it to you, I'm gonna stick in our temp here, 130. We took it off at 130, 131, and we're still there. And then relative to the more traditional sear, where you're just searing your steak straight away over the heat, Here, you should get a better maillard reaction because when you're actually doing the sear, you've already dried out the steak, and so all the energy from that cast iron is transitioning into the steak. It's converting through the maillard reaction, converting those amino acids into all those flavor bomb chemical reactions that just taste so good when you're actually cooking a steak over open flames. So the one drawback I will say is this took a while. So this was about 3 hours from start to finish, and this was about a 1 3/4, maybe 2-inch tomahawk. So just, if you are gonna be using this method, make sure you're planning accordingly just from a time standpoint. So now before we carve into this guy, I wanna thank John Paul Carvalho for sending us some pictures of a porterhouse that he did in cast iron over on Instagram. Just wanted to share that here with the community here. And if you've done any of the cooks here on this channel and you want to share that with the community, feel free to send us an email at barbecueandbottles@gmail.com or send us a DM over on Instagram. So with that out of the way, let's carve into this guy and do the taste test. So we're gonna come down the bone here with our knife. Just look at that. You can see that nice medium rare already. So now we're gonna do something a little different and just carve off the rib cap. Slice this up. Now this rib cap, this is the most tender, the juiciest part of the ribeye. If you are in a competition and the judges were actually assessing your ribeye cook, they'd take a bite out of this ribeye cap. So now carve out a little bit of this fat here. And then just start slicing. Wow, that is absolutely wall-to-wall medium rare. Now for a big steak like that, we need a big pepper grinder. Love this pepper mill. And then because it's a thick cut and we didn't do a dry brine, so we're gonna add on a little bit of finishing salt just to make sure this is really well seasoned. That is absolutely stunning. Gonna taste one of these garlics too. Beautiful. So good. Now I want you to get in here and look at this. There is virtually zero gray band around the exterior of this. So when you're doing reverse sear, you're typically doing it because you wanna nail that wall-to-wall medium rare. And this method, it's better than any reverse sear method I've ever done. This is just incredible. Every single piece throughout this whole steak is just perfect. But now, really what ultimately matters is how this tastes. And I'm telling you, I can't take the smell anymore. I've got to dive in. So I'm just gonna cut off a piece. Get some of that juice. Get some of the rib cap, a little bit of that fat. Oh, you gotta be kidding me. That is really good. You can taste the alder smoke in here. You've got a little bit of the rosemary and the garlic from the sear halfway through this cook. Now I'm gonna say, if you wanna try the middle sear, this is a top-notch way to actually do a steak. It's more like almost sous videing, and you will get that perfect wall-to-wall medium rare. But again, just keep in mind, it does take a long time. This was a 3.5 hour cook. So if you got a little bit of extra time, you wanna cook your family the perfect steak, try the middle sear method. Thanks, Oliver, for sharing this method with us. If anybody else has something you think we should try here on the channel, flick us an email. Smash that like button if you enjoyed this method. Make sure you subscribe to the channel for more of these cooks to come. Thanks for tuning in.